Welcome to our webinar on the London pharmacy market. Is it the right time to sell your pharmacy? My name is Scott Hayton and I'm a Director of Hutchings Consultants Limited. Whether it's the right time to sell your pharmacy is a good question and is one that all our clients and potential clients will have thought about at some point. When we're speaking to pharmacy owners, there are several regular questions raised when deciding if it's the right time for them, such as, what is the nature of the market at the moment? Are there many buyers out there for my type of business? What will I be left with in my pocket after the sale and all expenses? And perhaps the most important question of all, what price am I likely to receive for my business? During the course of this webinar, we'll touch on each of these as we explore how the London pharmacy market is currently performing. So what changes have we seen in the London market recently? We should clarify first of all that we are classifying London to include Central, Greater London and the home counties. The main stimulus of change is being seen in Central London, with a ripple effect flowing outwards from here. One of the most exciting changes we've seen since our last report is a further increase in demand for good quality pharmacy businesses in London. Inquiries, levels of interest in opportunities and competitive offers from buyers looking to acquire in London are up significantly again in the last 12 months. This is excellent news for London pharmacy owners who are thinking of selling. We're currently seeing fantastic goodwill values achieved as part of the increased levels of competition amongst buyers. The lack of supply of London pharmacies is resulting in buyers going all out to secure the right business for them. Let's take a look at some recent examples of London pharmacy sales we've carried out, which I think highlight this point very well. One was a pharmacy in West London. The marketing process generated interest from 14 parties and resulted in 10 competitive bids for the business. The final goodwill figure that was agreed following negotiation was 20% above the guide price, and the case was with solicitors within 6 weeks of going to market. Another example was in East London, marketing having generated interest from 13 parties and resulting in 9 competitive bids for the business. In this case, the highest offer received for the business was more than 25% above the indicated guide price. The sale was agreed and with solicitors within just 4 weeks of marketing. To maintain confidentiality in such a high demand market, all buyers are required to have signed a confidentiality agreement and are thoroughly vetted to establish their funding position and ability to proceed with any offer. With so many people looking to acquire in the London area, the knowledge our consultants gain through regularly speaking with buyers to establish their requirements, financial positions and appetite to buy is vital. It allows us to understand who the best buyers are likely to be before we even come to market the business. So what's the reason for the increase in demand? I think part of the answer to this one still stems from the scrapping of the 100-hour loophole back in September 2012. This restored stability and confidence to the market, and that's continued to grow ever since. Another contributing factor may be an oversupply of newly qualified pharmacists and subsequent pressure on locum rates, fueling the desire for these pharmacists to secure their own businesses. Thirdly, there's a feel-good factor across the UK economy right now, a belief that the worst is behind us, and lenders are supporting this idea with an increased willingness to lend. Finally, pharmacy is continuing to perform at good levels of profitability, with 32% gross profit margin on average across the UK market and something closer to 35% plus in London. So how about the quality of this increased demand? Well, this is a key point to consider. Anyone can register with an agent to buy. However, securing a pharmacy purchase within London is an extremely tough game. The winners are often very thorough, logical, and will think outside the box in terms of their approach to the offers. The majority will also have access to significant cash funds, either their own or from a combination of sources, perhaps family or colleagues. It would seem that in the last few years where buyers have been struggling to acquire pharmacies in London, this has been an opportunity for them to amass significant capital to invest when the right business opportunity finally comes along. Overall, the quality of potential purchasers we're in touch with for the London area is excellent. And of course, these include multiples, regional chains, buying groups, smaller independently owned groups, and first-time buyers. But in London, the real market driver in competition is being fueled by the independents. Existing pharmacy owners looking to grow their empire and well-funded, experienced pharmacists looking to make their first acquisition. The second major change we've seen in the London pharmacy market over recent months is a further increase in goodwill prices, or perhaps more accurately, higher premiums that a buyer is willing to pay to secure a good quality pharmacy business. This is no doubt led by the increase in competitive demand we've talked about just now, but also supported by some additional factors, such as the bank's eagerness to lend to the pharmacy sector because it is deemed secure and profitable, combined with the positive economic outlook overall, particularly following the election results, which for the most part gave a feeling of security and confidence to business owners and lenders. Now, I know that pharmacists like to use pence in the pound for goodwill valuation and comparison purposes. I'm regularly asked by pharmacists about similar sales that we've carried out and the pence in the pound values that we've achieved. Whilst I'll come on to the reasons why pence in the pound as an accurate valuation method is inappropriate in a short while, we can use it here to very roughly demonstrate the changes in the London market over the course of 2014 to 2015. If we return to the two examples that I gave earlier, which we used to demonstrate the levels of market demand we're seeing, in the sale of pharmacy business A, the top offer equated to a pence in the pound value of £1.45. In the sale of pharmacy B, the top offer equated to a pence in the pound value in excess of £1.60. It's worth noting that both pharmacies in these examples were in retail locations. Looking at these prices, the specific circumstances of each business and its net profits, I'm certain that these are higher offers than would have been achieved if the businesses were marketed in the last year or two. In our experience over the last 12 months, goodwill values for quality London pharmacies have probably seen a further increase in the region of 15%, and this is on top of the increase in the year prior. So how then do we value a London pharmacy on this basis? Well, this is tricky because a significant proportion of current goodwill values achieved for London pharmacies can arguably be incorporated into what we would call the premium, over and above a business's basic valuation. Regardless of who you speak to, this premium aspect and the valuation as a whole can only ever be a best estimate based on one's experience of similar London pharmacy sales. Ultimately, it is the buyers who determine the premium they are willing to pay to secure a particular business. Despite the difficulty, we can work through an example to demonstrate how one might approach a theoretical valuation scenario, and this will also help to emphasise the extremely favourable levels of goodwill that can be achieved in the current market. So here we have the theoretical example. Mr. Ward's chemist in Wembley is well established. He's owned the business for the last 28 years, is coming up to retirement, and is thinking of selling the business. In order to give Mr. Ward a valuation of his business, I've asked him to provide me with up-to-date financial statements, including his company accounts to the 30th of March 2015. The reason I've asked for this up-to-date trading information is because I know that this is how banks and lenders will value the business, and it's also the basis on which the buyers will make their offers. In addition to the financial information, I've also discussed the pharmacy business in detail with Mr. Ward to form a solid understanding of some key aspects of the business and how it operates on a day-to-day basis. This helps me to establish in my mind how desirable the business is likely to be at market. So from all of this information, I've established the following. Mr. Ward is based in Wembley, which is easily accessible to buyers by both road and rail, and is proven time and time again as a popular area for buyers within the Greater London area. He's located in a secondary parade of shops, relatively near to the tube station to capture commuters, and he also benefits from parking bays to the front of the shop, so it's very easy for patients to stop him. He's open for 58 hours a week, and there is competition for him locally in the form of 2 multiples and 7 or so independents over a distance of about a mile, both aspects par for the course in London. There are a significant number of surgeries nearby, but Mr. Ward has informed us that he is unaware of any plans for any of them to relocate, nor competitor relocations, or indeed new contract applications, so no obvious threats to the business that we can identify. 40% of Mr. Ward's average 4,500 items a month are sourced from his nearest surgery, located about 300 metres away, and the rest of the scripts are from a range of surgeries up to 2 miles away. His staffing costs are about £45,000 per annum, excluding any pharmacist cost, which is well within the normal levels to be expected, so this looks good. The pharmacy premises are held on a council lease with 10 years remaining, but it's under the Landlord and Tenant Act, so we don't anticipate any issues from the lenders there. Current rent and rates is £26,000 a year, which can be considered within the expected range for London. The shop unit itself is a single unit, but appropriately sized for the trading business. There's a consulting room fitted, a reasonable space for counter trade, decent sized dispensary and stock room, and also staff facilities. Currently, Mr. Ward is trading with an 85% to 15% NHS to counter sales ratio, which again is to be expected for the location. We're told by Mr. Ward that he's not currently dealing with any nursing homes, however there are some in the area that could be targeted by a new owner. He doesn't do much in the way of monitored dosage system or trays, just a handful of patients, and no more than about 200 items a month. In terms of enhanced services, Mr. Ward is currently carrying out the majority of these, but is nowhere near the maximum in terms of its MUR's quota and is not carrying out any NMS at all, so there is some potential here. In terms of internet sales or wholesaling, Mr. Ward has confirmed that he does not currently carry out either, making it clear to any prospective purchasers that the turnover in the accounts is straightforward NHS and counter trade. The starting point of our valuation is to look at the business accounts, so let's take a look at those now. The first things I can note as we look at the accounts are that Mr. Ward's business is currently trading as a limited company with a turnover of £630,000 and a gross profit of £245,000. This represents a margin of close to 39%, which, although high, is not out of the ordinary amongst London pharmacies. In terms of his expenses, we've already mentioned his wages and rent and rates figures are quite favourable. But the first real thing I can see of importance is that whilst Mr. Ward is working full-time in the pharmacy, there's no allowance for full pharmacist cover in the trading expenses. This is a very common occurrence in pharmacy accounts that we see. And for the purpose of calculating the true profitability of a pharmacy, it is necessary to allow a full pharmacist cover at market rate. This is one of the steps in arriving at the adjusted net profit figure, or commonly termed EBITDA figure, which the banks will use to calculate their valuation for lending. So in this instance, what we actually need to do is increase the expenses to allow for this cost. Now, I think this is the perfect time to revisit my earlier comments on pence in the pound as a valuation tool, and the reason why this cannot be used as a standalone, accurate means of valuing a pharmacy business. Imagine the implications of the following changes to Mr. Ward's accounts. A gross profit margin of 34% instead of 39%, an additional £10,000 in wages costs, perhaps through too many bodies, a change in the nature of the business increasing labour requirements, or just higher salaries. Lastly, an additional £10,000 in rent and rates payments, making a total of £36,000. Again, a perfectly reasonable scenario across Greater London as property prices do vary. Just these 3 points alone would reduce the EBITDA of the business by £50,800, and this is why pence in the pound is unreliable for a valuation method. In both scenarios, the turnover would remain the same, yet the bottom line profitability in the first instance was an attractive £87,600. After we made our changes, this had dropped to just £36,800. Clearly, any valuation carried out would have to change to reflect this significant difference in profits and market sentiment. So back to Mr. Ward's business then. We've already discussed his EBITDA of £87,600. It is this EBITDA figure which the banks will use for their valuation, typically applying a multiplier of between 5 and 7 times to arrive at their valuation for lending. This would result in a valuation figure of somewhere between £438,000 at 5 times and £613,200 at 7 times. However, when we factor the London location, potential for development of the business turnover, and desirability that a business of this nature will generate when taken to market, I'd probably look to market this business at offers over £750,000 for the goodwill. But that's not the extent of where I would expect the premium to lie. This is why establishing the buyer's financial credibility is vital to ensuring a smooth sale process and successful completion, because the offers will in almost all cases be higher than the lender's valuation. In marketing the business, a crucial factor is to set the guide price correctly. If we set it too high, interest will fall away before potential purchasers have read the sales particulars and their interest peaked. We need to set the marketing price at a level which will generate interest and promote competition between the prospective buyers. In marketing Mr. Ward's pharmacy this way, I'd expect to receive serious interest and offers from multiple parties, and ultimately expect to agree the sale at somewhere around the 825 mark plus. But as I said earlier, there's no scientific method to calculate the likely premium that will be paid, and the nature of the buyers involved, the level of competition fostered during the marketing process is ultimately going to set the final price. So before we move on, let's just take a very quick look at some factors that could have influenced our valuation figure there. Proximity to surgeries. A pharmacy located next door to or inside of a surgery or medical centre is extremely desirable due to the security of scripts. We would expect a pharmacy in this location to command a higher valuation and premium. Nursing homes. These are easy come, easy go, and as such we have to factor in that some of these may be lost following a sale, and the profitability from them therefore cannot be assured. For this reason, banks are not keen to lend against their income, and in some cases unwilling. Homes can also be difficult and time-consuming both to manage and to keep on board. High labour-intensive income such as MDS. If too high a proportion of the overall pharmacy items are through patients requiring monitored dosage system, this will have a direct influence on the staffing costs of the business. If the staffing costs are too high, this can detract from a business. It's a difficult issue to deal with and is not something that potential purchasers are particularly keen on resolving themselves post-sale. When offers are received, they can be lower to factor in time, cost, and any negative after effects on the trading. Property and lease issues. Security of tenure is a must for any buyer paying a significant amount of goodwill. It will also be a requirement of any lender. The terms of lease are also an important consideration, and if necessary, you should seek advice on these to ensure the goodwill and saleability of the business is maintained going forwards. You should try to make sure that all of this is in place before coming to market, otherwise you could see delays on the lease that stall the sale of the business. Even if straightening out property issues takes a while and you incur costs, the difference to you when selling could be worth tens or even hundreds of thousands of pounds in terms of goodwill value. It can also significantly reduce your stress. The size of the premises. It may be too late for you to do anything about this if there is an issue, but if the size of the premises is a limiting factor in the future growth of the business, again this could have an impact on the market valuation. High counter trade. Whilst 15 to 20% is generally expected around London, as this figure increases, this can be less desirable to buyers. It will depend on the specific nature of the counter sales, the maintainability of those sales, and then net profitability to the new owner. Internet and wholesale income. These forms of income are not regarded in the same light as straightforward NHS and counter sales income. Wholesale income can significantly distort the true gross profit margin of a business, and it's advisable to keep this aspect of the business clearly separated so that when you come to sell, it can be clearly distinguished by buyers. Generally, we find that buyers do not want to attribute goodwill value to typical wholesale income. So what else can you do to ensure that you're getting the top price? Well, one of the most important things that you can do is to get good professional advice. And many of you may not fully appreciate that good quality advice is equally as important before the sale as when you're actually making the decision to come to market. By the time you come to sell the business, it can be too late, and you may have already made some poor decisions that have significantly reduced the amount of money that you could have walked away from the sale with. One of the areas where good advice can really pay dividends is in the area of tax and accountancy advice. With our added expertise in pharmacy tax and accountancy, it's easy for us to spot situations where our clients have received poor tax and accountancy advice. Now, this may be things like an incorporation of a business carried out in a way which doesn't take advantage of current tax rules and potential savings. Or it could be poor accountancy practices with items and expenses being posted to incorrect areas of the balance sheet or profit and loss. In some circumstances, this can make the business appear less profitable than it actually is, and this can of course potentially reduce the goodwill value. On the other hand, it might appear more profitable, which can lead to last-minute price renegotiations when the buyers carry out detailed financial due diligence. In some cases, we still come across clients who've been advised by their accountant to dispose of the business in a way which would cost them hundreds of thousands of pounds more in tax than is necessary, or clients who've been advised to remove cash from the company before the sale, which can mean that they're paying an unnecessarily high rate of tax on that cash. Poorly constructed financial statements can reduce market confidence in your business and significantly impact on its value. As I mentioned earlier in Mr. Ward's example, the financial statements form the basis of the buyer's and the lender's assessment of the business. If you have poor or incorrectly constructed accounts, and even if the buyer can be convinced of the profitability and potential in the business, the bank will usually take an objective view and err on the side of caution. Another way to ensure that you receive top price for the business is to instruct a specialist pharmacy agent to handle the sale for you. Nearly every pharmacy owner will have had a private approach in the past. However, there are risks to bear in mind with private deals, and the main ones are underselling, stress, buyers who cannot fund the purchase, price renegotiations, poor terms of sale, confidentiality issues, time wasters, and buyers who used a private sale to their advantage, not yours. The most significant of these, I think, is the risk of underselling. On average, we see a variance of around 25 to 30% between the lowest and highest offers received for any particular pharmacy sale. So if you're only dealing with one individual, you'll have no idea where the offer stands within that range because you have no other benchmark offers from the market. Let me give you an example to put that level of variance into perspective. You could see as much as £180,000 difference within a pool of 6 or 7 offers before finally agreeing a sale at £800,000. Dealing with just one private buyer, You could well be at the bottom end of the offers range and you'd never know it. You're also in a very poor negotiating position when dealing with just one buyer, and you will have nothing to fall back on if the deal falls through. In the worst case scenario, if the buyer is unscrupulous, they could try to renegotiate the price at the last minute, and without the experience that a specialist pharmacy agent will bring to the table, and this is only gained through doing hundreds of deals, you're likely to have missed the warning signs. If the deal does proceed, you're unlikely to achieve the best terms of deal. The scenario we often see is clients that come to us after having been strung along for many months or even years in a few cases, all the while incurring legal and accountancy fees, and in the end the deal goes nowhere or the buyer just disappears. I always tell pharmacy owners who approach me with a private buyer the best course of action is to let us act on their behalf and handle the sale process for them. We have a tailored service for these private approach situations called Maximise, and the purpose of this is to take the private interest and develop the situation properly so that we can ensure maximum goodwill value for the seller has been achieved. We're used to handling this situation, and in 90% of these cases we take on, the sale's actually agreed with another individual who's prepared to pay significantly more. In these situations, the seller will benefit in 4 key ways: walking away with more money in their pocket, benefiting from our expertise, support and negotiation all the way through to completion, achieving the best terms and conditions of sale, and by significantly reducing their stress factor, allowing the seller to focus on the business so performance does not suffer. So how much might you be left with in your pocket after the sale and expenses, and how can you maximise this? Well, this is a complicated question that will need individual assessment. The amount you walk away from the sale with will of course vary from business to business and person to person, but there are some general points to consider. The professional advice that you receive during the sale has a direct and significant effect on the amount that you will walk away from the sale with. It's important to recognise that the sale of a pharmacy business is not a typical business sale. There are many aspects of the legal, tax and accountancy processes that are unique to pharmacy and therefore specialist. Solicitors. With solicitors, if you carry out some investigation, you'll find a very broad range in terms of both the quality and level of fees. But this is an area where the cheapest quote is not always the best. An inexperienced solicitor might spend many more hours on the exercise than a solicitor that has carried out significantly more pharmacy transactions. And this can end up costing you more in the long run, both in terms of the fees you accrue and also in terms of their ability to recognise unusual sale conditions in the contract. This can leave you legally and financially exposed even after the sale has been completed. Accountancy and tax. Similarly to the above and the points mentioned earlier, it can cost you significantly more in the long run if you take poor accountancy advice. This can be both in the form of a tax-saving opportunity missed because you were not informed of the area, or again leaving you financially exposed, for example if the tax warranties are not up to scratch. One of the best ways to maximise the amount that you walk away from the sale with is to plan the sale well in advance with a tax expert. To benefit from the majority of tax-saving opportunities, it's likely that you would have needed to structure the business and its operations in a particular way, sometimes several years in advance of the sale. This is why we encourage our potential clients to think about the matter well in advance, and this could be up to 5 years. This planning process will also help you to be absolutely clear in your mind as to the decision you are making to sell the business, which is an important factor. If you're not committed to the sale and this sentiment is apparent to potential buyers, it can affect the resulting offers that are received for the business. Buyers will put a lot of time, effort, and also professional fees into assessing your business before arriving at an offer. And if they suspect that you are not serious about the sale, this will affect their confidence and the willingness to proceed to the offer stage. With fewer competitive offers on the table, you're less likely to receive the top price for your business. If you do change your mind about a sale, bear in mind that the buyers do have very good memories. When you eventually come back to the market to sell, your credibility and that of the pharmacy sale itself is likely to be tarnished. Another key factor that affects the amount of money you walk away from the sale of your business with is government legislation, something that's a little unpredictable. Currently, the majority of our clients are able to qualify and benefit from the favourable Entrepreneurs Relief Rate of 10% on capital gains. However, no one knows how long this relief might continue for. We can revisit Mr. Ward's chemist to demonstrate how a change in the capital gains tax legislation may have affected what he walked away from his sale with. Let's say that Mr. Ward had agreed the sale at £850,000 and has a capital gain of £680,000. Well, at the current 10% rate, this means Mr. Ward is paying £68,000. But if that relief scheme was altered and Mr. Ward had to pay tax at, say, 20%, this would leave him having to pay £136,000. That's a significant chunk of Mr. Ward's goodwill value. If the scheme was abolished altogether, it could even revert to 28%. So let's round things up by coming back to our initial question. If you own a pharmacy in London, is this a good time to sell? Well, we've established that buyer demand across London is at probably the highest level it's been for a number of years, and goodwill values being achieved are equally favourable. We've also touched on the capital gains entrepreneurs relief that most sellers can qualify for at the moment. All of these points are very positive, but the overall question is a subjective one, and there'll certainly be some personal elements that come into the mix. Some other factors that we know will have a bearing, because our clients often mention them, are the direction of the industry as a whole and the challenges that pharmacists face going forwards. Common concerns are the increasing burdens and workloads placed on pharmacists, the more stringent inspection processes, and the shift in emphasis from a predominantly dispensing to a much more services-orientated role. Looking forwards, there's a continued risk of cutbacks within the NHS generally, and the future of pharmacy's funding is by no means guaranteed. It would look to be a challenging road ahead, and a lot of our clients seem to be of the mind that they don't have the energy or motivation to keep up with it all. There are, however, huge opportunities for those people who are prepared to embrace the change and to help pioneer it. Rapidly advancing technology is changing the game of pharmacy. EPS is now rolling out in most surgeries and pharmacies, and services such as automated dispensing and hub and spoke have the potential to change the way that pharmacy dispensing operates in the future. It is a slow process, but the tide is beginning to turn. But pharmacists will need to be receptive to change if they're to prosper. The decision of whether or not to sell your business is one of the most significant and difficult decisions that you'll make in your life. For the majority of you, it's a journey that you'll only take once, and doubtlessly it's something that you'll want to get right. If you'd like to have a confidential discussion with us about the value of your pharmacy business, the options available to you, or any other aspect of this evening's webinar, please feel free to call us on the number below. There's no obligation or charge, and we'd be more than happy to speak to you. Whilst the topic this evening has been the London market specifically, as I mentioned earlier, there has been a ripple effect outwards, and we have seen evidence of goodwill values increasing throughout the UK, but not as strongly as they have been in London. I'd like to thank you all for listening. I hope you found the information covered tonight useful, and we'll look forward to hearing from you in the future if we can be of service.